Hi everyone, let's look at the Ontario Express Entry Skilled Trade Stream, a really amazing stream for students and professionals who have work experience in Ontario in skilled trades, who have graduated and from a diploma. This would be one of the best streams they could think about. And before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Sandhu, and I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant based out of Ontario, Canada. Here is a bit of disclaimer. Just make sure that this video is only for informational purposes. This should not be construed as legal advice. If you want a legal advice, please do speak with or book a consultation with an immigration consultant or an immigration lawyer who is licensed to practice immigration. So without any further ado, let's look into this stream. So what makes it a good or a great PR stream? First thing is that there is no job offer required. Why is such a big deal? Because most non-express entry PNPs, they require a permanent full-time job offer from an employer, whether it's, for example, Ontario International Student Stream, Ontario Foreign Worker Stream, it could be Nova Scotia Skilled Worker Stream, and many other such streams. So this one is not based on that. So think of it as like a backward looking. So which means that it is not based on what you will be doing. It is based on what you have already done as far as your work experience is concerned. So it is aligned with express entry. So which means that it's not one of those non-express entry stream like the one which I referred earlier, which is Ontario International Student Stream or Foreign Worker Stream. So it is aligned with the express entry. So which means this is part of the few express entry streams offered by Ontario, including this one and human capital priority stream or the French-speaking skilled worker stream. So this is an express entry stream, which means that you need to have an express entry profile before you could be even considered by Ontario for notification of interest. Then you have low CRS score range. So this is very interesting, right? So now we know that those scores for Canadian Experience Class, for General Draw, they're above 500, which is a ridiculously high score, right? And most students who have just done a diploma or may have 1 or 2 years experience become kind of impossible to reach that score unless they either learn French or they have some other ways to boost their scores, maybe through a valid job offer based on an LMIA and so many other things they might have to consider in order to achieve that kind of ridiculous score. But this stream does not require those high scores. So even though we cannot judge what the score would be in the future draws, but rest assured it will be lesser than what would be a general draw or a Canadian Experience Class draw. Another interesting thing is that you have approximately 50 occupations or NOC codes which are selected in each draw. Obviously, they can change at any time, but unlike the category-based draw under skilled trades under the express entry, where there are only 10 NOCs, here you have approximately 50 targeted occupations selected every draw, and they may change. So no bachelor's required, which means that in other Ontario express entry streams, you need either a bachelor's degree or higher, with some exceptions. But here, there is kind of no education requirements, but there could be some education or licensing requirements if your experience is in one of those licensed occupations, right? So then you need to meet those employment requirements may have to meet certain requirements. Another thing is that you need only 6 months work experience in the targeted occupation, primary NOC, right? So this is very, very interesting. Even though you need to have 1 year of work experience in the skilled trades which are eligible, but in the targeted occupation, you only need 6 months of work experience. So we can talk a little bit more in the next slide. Now let's look at the eligibility requirements, right? So let's look at the work experience. And maybe I should just go directly to the website itself. So if you see here, one of the requirements is that you must have at least 1 year of cumulative full-time work experience or equivalent part-time in major group 72, 73, 82, 83, 93, or minor group 6320. So that's what they're looking for, right? So 1 year of cumulative full-time work experience. Now, what is a major group, right? So if you know that any NOC code is a 5-digit NOC code, right? So the first 2 digits is considered as major group. So for example, if I were to show you any NOC code, for example, let's say something starts with 72. So now these are like some of these trade related knock codes. So 72 is this part, right? So this is called as the major group. So your 1 year experience has to be one of the major groups: 72, 73, 83, 93, or minor group 6320. And if you receive the notification of this as part of a targeted draw, you will need to demonstrate that you have at least 6 months of 1 year of eligible work experience in your primary norm. And another things which is important is that your work experience must have been obtained in the last 2 years from the date of submitting your application to Ontario in one of the occupations you identified in the express entry profile in Ontario while maintaining the legal status, right? So let me talk a little bit more about this specific thing. So what would be one example of that? So one example is they mentioned that 73 is eligible. So now let's look at the 73 knock code. So 73 would be, if you see here, even truck drivers is 73, right? The first 2 digits are 73. So hypothetically, somebody could be a truck driver for 6 months. And now let's say in the recent draw, they invited machinist, right? So they invited machinist and they have 6 months experience as machinist. So now if machinist was their primary knock code, so they would have received the invitation if their CRS range is within 405 to 435 in the most recent draw on October 17th when we're recording this video, right? So another thing which is important is that you need to have a valid license or certificate if you are working in a compulsory trade. So you cannot be in a compulsory trades and not having a authorization to practice. So that is something which is very, very critical. Any experience will be only counted after you are authorized to practice that or you have a license. Third thing is that your current residence has to be in Ontario and you have legal status in Canada. So you must be living in Ontario and hold a valid work permit at the time you apply. Maintain status will work, but the important thing is you're not required to have a job offer at the time you apply. So let's go back to our slide. So that's pretty much as far as the work experience eligibility is concerned. Now, if you look at the language requirements, so you have CLB5 in English or French, and it has to be in all abilities, right? It's not like, for example, your CLB5 or CLB more in writing or speaking, but less in CLB4 in reading. So that will not make you ineligible. So it has to be CLB5 in all abilities. English tests which are eligible are as general, CELPIC, PTE core, and French ones is TEF Canada or TCF Canada. So now, very important thing to understand is that in Ontario, the settlement fund requirements are a little bit different as far as a typical express entry is concerned. Why? Because Ontario said that you can meet these settlement funds in one of two ways. Either you could have those funds in your bank account or your mutual funds or any of those kind of investment instruments, or you can also have a job offer or you can show your annual earnings from the ongoing employment in Ontario, or you can show a combination of that. So that's makes it very, very interesting. So you could have some funds in the bank account. Also, you will have a job offer maybe, or you're already working with an employer. Combining your funds as well as and your employment income, you could basically demonstrate that you have enough to meet those requirements. So the requirements are on the right side. So they were updated on June 3rd, 2024. Obviously, new requirements keep on coming. You always need to check the official website to see what is the requirement at the time you apply. So if you see the number of family members is 1, if it's only yourself, it says 14,690. If it's 2, it's 18,288, right? And then you have intention to live in Ontario. So the way you can show your intention to live in Ontario and you want to permanently settle in Ontario after getting your PR by showing that you've been working or have worked in Ontario, studied, leasing a property, visiting, have professional networks. So there are many ways you can prove that kind of thing. Now let's look at what is the process to apply, right? So first you need to have a valid express entry profile. So if you don't even have that, so this stream is not open to you. And if you have a valid express entry profile, then what Ontario does is they look at the profile and if you meet certain requirements, and they may invite if based on whatever the criteria was that specific draw. For example, the recent draw which happened on October 17, 2024, one of the criteria was that the score has to be between 405 and 435, and they have a list of targeted draw targeted occupations. And if your primary knock is in one of those occupations, they would invite you. And after you have received a notification of interest from Ontario, you submit complete application to Ontario within 45 days. And if you're nominated, you accept nomination within 30 days. And upon doing that, you get 600 points added to your Express Entry profile. So the maximum you will have is like 600 for your additional factors. And now, whenever you get the Express Entry draw, so you will be invited. For example, let's say if it's a general draw or it's a PNP draw, which happens very regularly, maybe at least once in a month. So you will get invited. And at the time, you will have 60 days to submit the complete application. And then the normal Express Entry processing times will apply to you. For example, you might get your PR within approximately, let's say, 6 months, give and take, depending upon the average processing times at the time. Now, if you look at the previous draws, right, so you can see that 5 draws have happened for this year, starting with in January once, and then the last one happened in October. So the scores are kind of increasing. I think a lot of people are going into skilled trades, but still they are not as ridiculous as what we have for the Canadian experience class or general draw per se, right? So the last draw happened in October 17. The score range was 405 to 435. So now what does it mean? If your score was less than 405, you were not invited. If your score was more than 435, you were not invited, right? So there are some ways you can do things. And yeah, so we may not be able to talk about those things right now, but that's number one. And another thing which I want to tell about is the recent knock invited in the October 17 draw. So now, whichever knocks are invited in the recent draw doesn't mean that exactly the same knocks will be invited in the future draw as well, right? They can always change. Because if you see in a typical skill trades, there might be, let's say, hypothetically, I don't know the exact number, but there might be 70 or 80 skill trades which fall, right? But out of those 70 or 80 skill trades, they might only invite 40 or 50 or 60, right? So obviously 20 or 25 may not get invited, right? Just to make a point. So we do not know which one will get invited in any specific draw, but we have a good probability, and we can kind of, based on the historical trends, we know which are likely to get invited. So you can always, focus on those. Another thing very important is that, as I mentioned earlier, so this could be a great opportunity for, even if you have studied from Canada and did a 2-year diploma in business or IT or any of this, because in the list of these occupations, most of these occupations may not require a license. So when you do not require a license to practice in Ontario, which also means that without license, you could have, let's say, a bachelor's or a diploma in business management, and you could have been working as a glazier or a drywall installer or any of those kind of occupation, or residential commercial installer, and gain that experience and be eligible for this specific stream. So other than the compulsory occupations which require license, so a lot of options are available under the non-compulsory occupations, and you have a really good chance of getting invited. So this is pretty much it. So what I would suggest to you is that make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you want more information, do check the description below as well. So you will have quite some information and links for you, or if you were to book a consultation, so you will have that information as well. So I wish you all the very best, and thank you so much for watching.